Good day, booktubers. I'm here today with a review of Mudbound by Hillary Jordan, and I just reviewed Vile Bodies by Evelyn Waugh, and I mentioned that I had a really hard time sinking into it and getting to know the characters emotionally, and Mudbound was the complete opposite. I feel like I've read a lot of really heavy stuff in September, a lot of stuff that I really had to force myself to pick up, but this book, I picked it up on Saturday right before the end of the month. I read it by Monday night. So this one snuck in under the radar in September. I really thought it would be an October book, but I just adored it and sucked it down in no time. This won the Bellwether Prize for Fiction, which is, I think, something that Barbara Kingsolver is heavily involved in. And I can't remember the particulars of the Bellwether Prize, but I think it's for a first novel, or maybe even a novel that is unpublished at the time that it wins. I can't remember. I'll have to look into that, but it's a pretty big deal. I've been an admirer, or at least interested in a lot of other Bellwether Prize winners. Hillary Jordan really amazed me in this book. Because I grew up in the Deep South, actually I guess Texas is more Southwest, but we share some of the problems historically and culturally that the Deep South in the U.S. would. You know, issues of race can be problematic, or were until the Civil Rights Movement and afterwards, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, I, as a young person, got quite burned out on Southern fiction because I found that the same tropes and themes and stuff come up over and over, which is not a bad thing. I mean, it rightly so, but after a while, you kind of go, been here, done this, you know. But Mudbound was really quite an amazing book. It takes place in the Deep South, Mississippi, after World War II, so right as the soldiers are coming home. We have two families, and I'm also not big on family sagas, so I wasn't sure I would enjoy this, but I really did. We have the McAllen family, a white family, and they begin the story living in Memphis, in the city, and Henry McAllen marries his wife Laura, and they have children, or begin to have children, and they move away from their families, away from Laura's family in particular, to Mississippi to farm. And it's like Henry's dream to do that, but he doesn't really consult with Laura about it. It's one of those, and now we're moving to the farm type things. And so Laura, as you can imagine, has some adjustment to do. And they also take Henry's father, Pappy, who is an incredibly unlikable character. Like, he's just unpleasant, racist, harsh to everybody, not just to African American people in the area, but to his own family. I mean, he's just an incredibly dislikable character. So they move to the farm, and there they meet the Jackson family. Hap is the father, Florence Jackson, and then they have children. The one that figures most prominently in this book is Ronsel Jackson, who is one of the first black soldiers on the front line in World War II. He was in a tank corps, fought for General Patton, and so right off the bat, we have some common ground between these two families, because Henry has a little brother named Jamie, who has also been in the service. He is white, so he has a very different experience, but there's always some commonality there in the way that one processes trauma and things like that. So they automatically are kind of on more even ground and even footing, and they have a better understanding of each other than most people do during this time period between a white man and a black man. So that's where all the shit starts, right? Ronsel and Jamie become good friends, and they drink together, and Jamie has a real drinking problem, and that gets him into a lot of trouble. Ronsel is a stand-up guy. I mean, he really tries to take care of Jamie, and he really gets in trouble for it, because there's a mixing there and an understanding between the races that was not accepted by the larger community. Pappy, in particular, plays a big role in kind of setting fire to this very tense situation. And I won't tell you how it all plays out, but yeah, it's a heartbreaking book. It really is a really heartbreaking book. But Ronsel is in an interesting frame of mind. I mean, he has an additional struggle. Coming back from Europe during this period of time, he was not treated like a second or third class citizen in Europe as he was in the Jim Crow South. He was treated like an equal. He could have a relationship with a white woman and no one blinked. So he got used to being an equal. And so for him to come back to the Jim Crow South really was a culture shock for him as well. He got put in his place a lot, which was really hard to read because, you know, he deserves to feel the way he did in Europe during the war. And it's sad that he was treated better during the war in Europe than he was as a GI coming home to the U.S. So that's really hard to swallow. I'm always interested in the way that a white American author will deal with race relations in the South during this time period. I find more often than not there's this great white hope kind of quality that it really messes with me a little bit. It's really hard to read. I'm thinking of books like The Help. I read The Midwife of Hope River earlier in the year. And what I find in this book is that Hillary Jordan is fearless when it comes to discussing race relations at this time. The McAllens are not bad white people, you know, but they do have the prejudices of the time. Even though they may seem like they can transcend it, they're really a product of the time. And so Henry says some dislikable things. He's not a person who would go out and lynch anyone. He's not. But he thinks that his tenant farmers are somehow less than he is. And so does Laura. And, you know, Jamie has his moments of thinking that too. And that seems like a fearless thing for an author to really commit to, you know, is making the white characters who are more like you, more like the writer, not terribly likable. I mean, it seems like a thing that should be able to happen more often, but I find that in a lot of books there's, like I said, this great white hope mentality that the kind owner or landowner or landlord or, you know, whatever will try to lift up the African American family and yada yada, and that was not the majority during this time period, unfortunately, because we're talking about 1945. It was a long time before the Civil Rights Movement. And so those Jim Crow ideals were very ingrained in everybody, almost, in a majority of people at that time. So, yeah, I just felt like Hillary Jordan did a really remarkable job with this book. It was an easy read, it was emotionally involving, it was multifaceted, and it was quite fearless, and I really appreciated that. So I'm looking forward to reading more by Hillary Jordan. I have When She Woke on my TBR and can't wait to get to it. Have you read this book? What did you think about it? And I'll see you soon. Bye.